Now we switch gears. The analysis that we're doing for 7 provinces now, including Nova Scotia, looks at the demand for skill using the 2006 census, the supply of skill using the 2006 census with literacy skills imputed onto it in a clever way. And these charts look at how the demand for skill has changed since the 2006 census. This one's by occupation, I think. Yeah, occupation. What we find at the Canada level is, since 2006, the jobs that have been created are much higher skill level than the jobs that have been destroyed or lost. And so the labor market in Canada is getting more skill intense, more literacy skill intense at a frightening rate. So just keep that in the back of your mind, because I'm going to describe a situation where we have these huge literacy shortages, and this analysis tells us they're going to get worse rapidly. I didn't put the Canada ones up, I should have. In all provinces except New Brunswick, the slope of these lines are like this, very steep. In New Brunswick, they run the other way, which means that the New Brunswick economy has been getting less skill intense. And Nova Scotia is slightly positive, so you're getting more skill intense, but at a slow rate, which comes back to the demand side, that you need to find a way to create literacy intense jobs, or you're going to be in economic trouble. And those blue dots are occupations. The percent numbers on the left and percents on the right. Okay, now another switch of gears. What you're looking at here are 22 countries. The black lines down the middle are average scores, and the length of the bars is defined by the skills of the lowest 5th% of people to the highest 95th% of people. This tells us some interesting things. The first one is that Canada has an average skill level that's extraordinarily high. We're only behind the Nordic countries. So you'd think that we're in pretty good shape by this standard. There's a but here, and the but is that the length of the bar is much longer than in many other countries. And that means that our skill is highly variable. So around the average, some people have very low skills and some people have very high skills. This is that data broken down for Canada, but plotted by the percentage of people that have low skills by average scores. And on this standard, Nova Scotia has a relatively low average literacy level compared to many provinces, and a percentage of level 1 and 2 people that's high. So you have a low average and more people who are notionally at risk. This is a complicated graph, but it tells a simple story, and I'll just tell you what the story is. This is 50-year literacy trajectories relative to the Canadian average. So during this period, every education system got better. What we've done is done the comparison against the Canadian average at each period, and what you see is that the relative performance of the Nova Scotia education system has been falling. So some provinces, like Quebec, here, since 1951, have gotten continually better, but in relative terms, Nova Scotia's gotten worse. Worser. So this puts some heat on the educators to learn from the jurisdictions that have been getting better and to invest in using the same technology for instruction. Along the same theme, this shows scores in the 2000 PISA study, 15-year-old literacy. And here Canada looks pretty good on average. It's the little black dot up there, second only to Finland. And the Canadian provinces array nicely in the top part of the distribution, except for poor old New Brunswick. That's the only Canadian province behind the United States. But on average, we look pretty good, and Nova Scotia looks pretty good. You're right below Japan. Another chart that gives educators the willies. This is from that same PISA data, and what it starts out with is averages that aren't adjusted for anything. So Alberta's at the top, they do the best in the country. New Brunswick's at the bottom, they do the worst in the country, and all of the maritime provinces are arrayed here in the bottom. Nova Scotia is here, and what we do as we walk across, we adjust for things. The first adjustment is taking out the effect of the kids' parents' education and income levels. And so in Alberta, what you find is they're teaching kids whose parents are relatively rich and educated. Once you take that effect out, they fall in relative performance. The second set are things like how much you invest in education, things that the school system at a global level have control over. And the last set of adjustments are school processes that matter to how well instruction goes, like disciplinary climate, the strength of the curriculum, how well the teachers are trained. And after those things are adjusted, our right-wing friends in Alberta fall to second last because given who they're dealing with and how they organize their system, they're not giving very good value for the money. Nova Scotia looks pretty good. You actually get a little bit better, given the way the system's structured. So this tells us two things. There is a technology that works better, and that you can have control over the quality of the education system, something that education ministers often forget. This is a different look at that data. What we've done is put different countries and different provinces on British Columbia's performance standard. BC went through a process saying, what is it going to take for someone to be a lifelong learner, a productive worker, and an active citizen? And what we see, depending on the province, between 20 and 40% of Canadian students don't meet this standard. In Nova Scotia, it's 35%. So a third of the kids we're pushing out of the system don't, by an objective standard, have the skills needed to function in a global economy. This is problematic. If it was a Japanese factory, it'd get shut down really quick. And so, given the relationship between low skills and people's life chances, the system is manufacturing inequality even as we speak. And the next two charts speak to that inequality. What you're looking at here is a probability of kids graduating from secondary school, getting their secondary matriculation, by skill level. People at level 1, the lowest level, 60%. Kids with high skills graduate at 100%, just about 98%. That effect gets amplified. This chart shows the probability of getting access to post-secondary education. About 25% of low-skilled people get access to post-secondary. It's almost 90% of the high-skilled kids. So this is an example of the market now functioning in a way that selects on skill and rewards kids with high literacy skills. Okay. So that little aside, that's the education system that we have to fix if we're going to fix the problem in the long term, but it's not enough. So the question is, where else are we going to get skills? This looks at the impact of formal education and training of adults, including literacy training. And by this standard, Nova Scotia looks pretty good. You have a high percentage of participation and a high average hours of training. So things look, in relative terms, pretty positive in this respect, that you might get some skills from this flow. But our rates of training are half those of those Nordic countries that were ahead of us. So we're not likely to catch up to them, even with this positive news.